The adventure like no other. A Miniature Railway Adventures feature-length story. Written by Michael White. This audiobook has been adapted by the author. The story so far. Our friends have found themselves in a different world after travelling through the telepathic engineered corridor, or the TEC, which is a machine that corpses are stored back in their own world. Now stuck in this other world, the group had taken shelter in a small town ruled by an aging dictator who was on the brink of death. That is, before Gran and Gaze were able to help restore his youth by means of the fuel that powers the TEC, which coincidentally is a kind of youth serum. Now restored to his youth, the dictator, Frank, is now ready to pounce on the group, who are hiding out by working for the town's only transport, a run-down narrow-gauge railway. During their time there, the gang are trying to blend in so as not to get caught by Frank's army, though Cars' idea of running an excursion might be a bit of a giveaway if the others have anything against it. Though it seems that one member of the gang is already concerned about other things that have taken hold since they arrived in this world, and unanswered questions are quietly being asked. Chapter 7. The Excursion. The sun beamed down outside the messroom window. Boomer, the railway's Yorkshire Terrier, was sound asleep in his basket while the rays of sun kept his fur warm. He yawned sleepily as he nuzzled his head down further into his pillow. He was feeling on top of the world. Jane, too, was also feeling very chilled. It had been a short while since Corpse was able to get the TEC to work again, and to get her and the others home and safe. Right now, he and Whitehouse were busy dismantling the TEC and dispensing all the bits into a skip that had conveniently arrived shortly after they got home. Casey was out on the line with Lady Grange and taking several passengers around the circuit, and Cars was... Where was Cars, actually? Jane thought carefully on where he had gone after they got back. She knew she'd seen his back amongst the group when they stepped through the TEC, but he suddenly disappeared somewhere. The door opened and Whitehouse stepped through. "How's it going?" asked Jane from the counter. "She'll be done in a matter of minutes now," greeted Whitehouse. He scratched the innards of his green hair till he retrieved a washer which had fallen into it during the deconstruction. "Any coffee going?" "I'll make some now," Jane said, but paused as her arm was just hovering over the tin. She turned. "Coffee? Nothing wrong with coffee, is there?" said Whitehouse as he chewed the washer like a gum. "I suppose not," mused Jane. She turned back, but found the coffee tin appeared to have vanished. Even the kettle and teapot had vanished. "You haven't seen the—" she began. She jumped back in alarm, for Cars had appeared right behind her. Jane looked about. The messroom had fallen into darkness, and a small plume of light had shone down on the two of them from somewhere above. Jane looked at Cars. His face was hidden beneath his hair fringe as he continued to stand motionless before her. "Mark, what's going on?" Jane asked. "Where have you been?" Cars remained still. Not even a shudder. "I said, where have you been?" asked Jane again. She walked over and gave him a nudge. At this, Cars gave a lurch. His head threw itself back as two bright red eyes shone from a face she'd never seen before. It was thin, pointed at the cheeks, and with a beard trimmed sharp at the chin, which looked like it was ready to slice her in two. With a shrill cry of maniacal laughter, the creature turned round and returned swinging a sharp metal object towards Jane. Her eyes gleamed bright blue as she watched it slicing into her sides and her blood trailing red along the ground like a curtain signaling her final call. Jane stared. She wanted to scream, but the scream that came wasn't her own, but Casey's. Slowly, she moved one eye, expecting to find Casey standing over her blooded corpse, but found that she was looking at the walls of the converted coach. She looked back at the pool of blood and found it to be nothing more than the red tarpaulin that was used for the compartment's divider. She turned onto her back and stared up at the ceiling. Her ears then twitched as she could hear a commotion outside. "Will you knock it off?" a spluttering exclamation sounded. Covering her shoulders with a blanket, Jane parted another tarpaulin used for covering the coach window to see where the shouting was coming from. Casey and Whitehouse were standing by their hammocks, drenched in water. Carr stood by with the nearby water crane, the dripping hose in one hand, while his other hand was turning off the tap. "Rise and shine, you two," he said. "I thought I'd spare you your morning shower by using it as a form of wake-up call." "You could have used a less shocking one," growled Casey, wringing his cap out. "I just hope he's not going to make a habit of it every day," grumbled Whitehouse sourly. Cars laughed. "A cold shower never hurts anyone. You want to bet?" No, let's not start our first working day angry. I've woken you too early so you can go and get the engine ready for the morning's train. Rory is already at the shed getting the fire lit on Irish Giant, and Jane should have breakfast ready for you both once you have everything ready. "And a spare set of clothes too, I hope," Casey said, as both he and Whitehouse squelched over to the sheds. Jane sat back from the window and sighed again. They were still trapped in this world without any hope of getting home. She just hoped Corpse would be able to figure out a way to repair the tech and to get them home again, as the feeling of the whole situation was becoming a bit of a worrying downer. She could hear cars coming back into the coach and over to where her divided section was. "You up, Jane?" he asked, slightly parting the tarpaulin door. "Mark!" exclaimed Jane, slapping the top door shut. Cars blushed. "Oh, sorry, I just wanted to check that you were." "You don't just walk into someone's private space when you feel like it," retorted Jane. "I just wanted to ask to see if you can make us start on the breakfasts early. You know, it's our first train today, so we've got a lot to get on with." There was a pause. "Jane?" "Yes, I'm just getting up," Jane replied, a little agitated. She went quiet again. "Okay then," said Cars. "I'll just see how things are at the station, and be sure to have the kettle on when I get back." He paused in case Jane was about to say sorry for her outburst, but luck wasn't on his side. Donning his jacket, he stepped off the coach and proceeded his way over to the station to open up. Jane sat for a while in her compartment, listening to his footsteps trailing away. She rubbed her tired eyes with the back of her hand and stretched. She wasn't sure if there was anything left over from the night before to make breakfast, so it looked as if she might have to ask Alice again to see if there was anything she could spare from the canteen. She should have asked Cars to ask for her, but she didn't feel like talking to him that much this morning. The way he just took charge of everything like nothing had happened, especially after his encounter with that biker yesterday. And then last night he had already planned out what roles everyone was going to play in this excursion he devised. Casey and Corpse were going to be the engine crew, Whitehouse the guard. He had assigned himself as the head conductor of the train, and for her, caterer of buffet. Another catering role. Why couldn't she do something else for a change? She knew she could handle other work, for she'd seen the others work back at home. "It's more your style, Jane," he said to her last night when he told her. "A simple and less complex role to play." How would he know what style suits her? He never knew what suited her, even if he asked her. And when she offered to help on the footplate instead, Cars quickly and firmly declined the change. Why? Why was he so determined to prevent her from helping with any of the heavy tasks, instead giving her all the light ones? And why does he have to be so stern when addressing it? Jane remembered what Rachel Davidson, Cars' old girlfriend, had told her when Bernard had corrupted his mind while working for the MCS. He acted really odd throughout most of their time together to a point where he was a completely different person. And now, there were some traits of this persona starting to make themselves known again. Was she starting to see this version of Cars emerge again? Jane got dressed and proceeded outside. The morning was grey, with small patches of sun slowly making themselves known to the world. They shone in small rays which made the countryside around them seem like one big stage show, being lit up for the day's performance. She walked over to the water tower and washed her face. Her clothes could do with a wash too, as they were starting to look a bit grubby. As were the others. No doubt Mark will put her on laundry duty too. He would right enough, she thought, as she tied her hair back into the familiar high ponytail. Well, the moment he brings it up, she can well and truly tell him to... No, now is not the time to get all angered and stressed. They've work to do, and Corpse did say that they'll be out that evening to collect the tech from the site for him to have a proper look over. She filled the kettle and began gathering some scrap wood for the fire. Frank smiled as Cyril's men unloaded the tech upon the fort's courtyard. Moss fell from the rusting ring, dispensing critters who had taken up residence within the machine's casing. The machine was a sorry sight upon the railways group's first discovery of its condition, but after being uprooted and moved to Fort Cumgrove by Frank's men, it was more than a shadow of itself. Gears walked around the machine to take in the damage of neglect. He pressed a button on the panel, at which, as expected, did nothing. "So, this is the machine you and Grinder came through then?" Frank inquired. "Looks like it," answered Gears, wiping his hand on his jacket. "Though it will take more than a single person to get this thing fully functioning again. Could take months, years even. Or perhaps an eternity," Frank added. He turned to look at Cyril, who was standing at the ready with his men. He nodded. Then, to Gears' surprise, Cyril and his men started pummeling the machine fiercely with large sledgehammers. If it screamed, then this one wouldn't have even had the chance to, as with each blow, the shape of the machine became less and less. The monitors were smashed and wires were ripped from their sockets. The large ring was quickly bent to an octagonal deformed shape as the men continued their work. After 5 minutes without pausing, Frank signaled for them to stop, and they stepped back. The tech was now well and truly beyond repair, as nothing more than broken circuit boards and shard metal were all that remained. "I'd like to see that legend come true now, considering there's no machine to make it happen," grinned Frank. He patted Gears' shoulder as he handed him a sledgehammer. "Care to make the final blow?" All this time, Gears was wondering was it all worth it, letting Frank know about the group and the machine. But then, he was also starting to think about Miranda and the slaves. If he were to go back home, he'd leave her in the perilous situation that she was in, with no one to openly talk to. But, if he were to stay, he would persuade Frank to let her be his responsibility, and so would make her suffering less more sorrowful than it was already. Okay, he will have to start acting like a total bastard for the rest of his life, but with a careful thinking and planning, he will become a more caring bastard. With this decision made, Gears swung the hammer, and with a satisfying crunch, the last frame of the tech was hammered home to nothing. Frank clapped his hands cheerfully as he welcomed Gears back to his side. "I see you've made the right choice with this new life of yours, Gears. Stick with us, and we'll show you and your brother the way things should work to ensure order is restored." "Talking of whom, where is he?" asked Gears. "He said he wanted to have a look at something earlier, but I never got a chance to ask him." "Oh, I'm sure he'll turn up when he's ready," smiled Frank. "I think he's got all sorted out too, which I'm sure we'll all be pleased to see come the time. Cyril'll have this heap loaded and ready to be taken to the scrappers this evening. The only thing that's worth salvaging from that contraption of Thompson's is the precious fuel. Or, to put in better terms, my fountain of youth." Before the tech was brought before him, Frank had enough of dosage injected into him and was already feeling every bit of power surging through his bloodstream. But he knew that this was a limited amount, and it would be very careless to use the whole tank up in such a short time. Already, he was having some of his men try and decipher the contents of the mixture to see if it was possible to reproduce. But after several hours, no joy was shown. So, to ensure to keep going, Frank had several small syringes prepped should he ever be needing to inject his system again whenever any weak signs of weakness came about him. His first doses of serum had already taken a lot out of him, and was starting, but very slowly, to wear off. "Now that we've dealt with one problem, Gears, my lad," Frank said, placing his hand on Gears' shoulder again, "let us deal with the second one. These rail pests you mentioned." "Oh, yes," Gears inquired. "From what Skid tells us, they are based on that little railway station in the town of Tierman-on-Brien. We'll not let on that we know that they're there. Just let their guard be lowered until we're ready to make our final move. Play with the catch before the kill, as it were." "And what will we do with them once we've done the playing?" Frank smiled as he escorted Gears along the fort's exterior corridor by the workshops. "Let us not think ahead. We've plenty of time to play with the prey. For now, let us prepare for our first game, where I think a little spying and role-play is in order." The sound of roaring engines caused them to pause in their tracks. They looked over to one of the garages and saw Grinder busy testing the revs on a new machine. It had 2 tractor tires fitted at the back and a roll cage with a spider's web pattern across it. "Ah, it appears that your brother has found his patch," Frank commented. "All right, let's see how she handles," shouts Grinder from the controls. A signal was given from the marker, and with a jaunty sounding klaxon for a horn, Grinder took off. Trails of dust were left in his wake as he graced the corners of the arena as smooth as skating on ice. Pallet obstacles were placed for him to negotiate around, to which he obliged without so much as a chip being broken. His showstopper was to launch himself from a ramp over a pit of molten iron ore. Gears watched on with concerned admiration. He remembered back home that Bernard had forbidden Grinder in participating in any cross-country rallying, not since he took a Ford Angler around the courtyard's roundabout and nearly collided with his precious homemade Rolls-Royce convertible. But the bug never left Grinder, and he always tried to find an excuse to do a bit of rallying. Nearer and nearer Grinder got, changing gear at every interval. The pit came closer and closer till the last moment he was skyborne. The roar of the engine silenced every audible within the region to a whisper as it hung in the air for what seemed like an eternity. The look on Grinder's face was of pure joy. He had awoken a long-lost passion and was making every single moment of his time expressing it as long as he could. He cheered the Duke Boy howler before gravity took hold and brought him back down to earth. He landed on the other side of the pit violently, but nonetheless in one piece. After baptizing the rest of the arena with several donut markings, Grinder switched off the engine and jumped out of his seat. "Whoa!" he cheered. "Went flying through the air, I did. That will put one in the headlight for old Bernard and his stupid rules." "Excellent performance, Grinder," replied Frank. "I can see that you make a fine racer. I doubt any of the others have shown a performance like that." "Pfft," scoffed Skid from nearby. "Anybody could perform a move like that with chance." He didn't intend his remark to be heard, but Grinder heard it clearly. "Oh, really?" he said, pointing an inquisitive finger on Skid's chest. "I'd like to see you do that stunt yourself, if you think you can do any better." "All right," Skid said, donning his helmet. "You're on." Leaping on his motorbike, Skid kicked life into the beast, and without waiting for the marker to sound his departure, advanced as if he was stung by a wasp. His bike squealed in a high-pitched whine as it ascended the arena's curves. Up and up he rose, to which his tires were just below the borderlines. Then, with the grace of a grasshopper, Skid brought the bike to its next ascendment, the fiery pit. He flashed a grin to Grinder as he revved up and sped towards it. He was moving faster and faster, gaining enough speed to make the cross. Then, just as he was descending the ramp, it happened. There was a bang, and the bike's front tire disintegrated. Skid was flung from the saddle and watched in horror as his beloved bike was thrown off course and was swallowed up in the depths of the molten ore. Skid's eyes were dumbstruck. What could have caused his bike to fail like that? As he sat up, his eyes fell upon a sharp, broken bit of metal which, upon closer inspection, came from Grinder's car. "You caused me to crash!" Skid yelled. "I would have made that jump if your car hadn't had a case of dandruff." "I would have assumed from your skilled driving you would have spotted that shard," Grinder retorted. "And besides, the spare metals here are all fatigue, so I can't help it if things were to break off as easily as that." "Well, you can just help by paying for a new bike," Skid snapped. "Do it yourself!" Grinder yelled. Boys, Frank interjected. "The matter is a simple fix, and I'm sure we can settle this as gentlemen, can't we?" They looked away from each other with folded arms. "I propose we settle this matter by the next performance this Wednesday. I'm sure a set of tasks will be thought up for yourselves and the other competitors to take part in. But now let us indulge ourselves on more important matters." "My bike is more important to me, sir," exclaimed Skid hotly. "I put my life and soul into that thing." "All the more reason for you to be starting to think of a new replacement," Frank said coldly. "You can sort out your troubles on your bike later, Skid. For now, let us get back to the topic at hand. Now, Gears, you and Grinder know more about those others than we do. So, if they were to reveal their involvement in that old railway station, how would they go about it?" "Simple," says Gears. "Their leader, Mark Carson, would try and improve the way things are worked previously to a stage where it would be deemed reliable." "They seemed to be prepping for something when I saw them," Skid muttered. "Cleaned up engines and stock." "So it seems as if they want to run a special train of sorts," mused Frank. "I'd say it would be a shame if it were to go astray. Now, let's see. Firing up would take several hours, plus the sorting of stock. Let's say come 10 o'clock, they'll have the first train ready. Until then, I'd say the first game to play with our prey goes as follows." "Oh, that was a grand breakfast, Jane. Despite the rationing," commented Cars, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. Said Jane, as she cleared out the tin plates. The mood in the air was stale. What with what happened yesterday and Cars' encounter with that biker, everyone was unsure as to what to say or do. However, to try and ease the pressure, Whitehouse offered to do the dishes, as he would have time free before his shift was to start. To this, Jane gave a small smile. The Irish giant stood outside the sheds gently blowing off steam as Casey gave it the once-over. As his clothes were still soaking wet from his morning's alarm call, he had donned a pair of overalls which were a few sizes too big for him. So he had to roll the trousers and sleeves up in order for him to work on the engine's controls. Corpse had also donned some overalls and was busy shoveling coal into the tender from the small bunker. "And here's me thinking working the miniaturized versions of these engines was difficult," he said, wiping his face with a bit of cotton waste. "You'll get used to it," smiled Casey, and checked his watch. "Another half hour, and we should be ready to start shunting the train to the platform. So keep shoveling," he added, when Corpse stopped for a breather. Wilbert and Harry were just opening up the station house when cars walked up. "Special," it read in bold green colours. Harry sniffed at it dismissively. "Your excursion, I take it?" he inquired. "Yes," said Cars defensively. "It may not look or feel much, but we're trying our best to ensure your railway gets a good reception from its residents. After all this time in torment and suffering, the least we can do is to give them some form of a boost in morale." "I don't know," Harry said. "Oh, hush up, Harold," said Wilbert. "I think it's a good idea. But mind you don't take things too seriously on both the customers and staff." "Oh, I'm sure the others will manage fine," assured Cars. "Chris and Rory are managing the engine, Mike is doing the guard, Jane is in charge of buffet, and I'll manage conducting the train." "You will, eh?" Harry mused. "And have the others agreed to their roles?" "Of course they have, as I said they would." "That means no on some cases," Wilbert's eyes told Harry. But in case Cars was made aware of this, he quickly changed the subject. "Here, you'll be needing these if you're going to look the part of the roles you're playing." From within the office, Wilbert handed Cars 3 paper-wrapped parcels tied with twine. "These are your uniforms. The top one is yours, Jane is the next, and the last bit is for your blue-haired chum. Talking of which, you better tell him to do something about that colour scheme he has, as I'm sure it'll cause some debate among the customers." "Uniforms? Ha! Now you're talking my lingo." Cars grinned as he took the parcels. "I'm sure with these on, everyone will know which roles we're playing while taking this excursion. And don't worry about Mike, I'll get him to do something about his hair before we open." "I'm sure they will," Wilbert muttered and winked to Harry. Jane and Whitehouse had just finished cleaning the dishes when Cars returned with the parcels. "Here we are, compliments of Wilbert and Harry. Make sure you get washed up before putting these on. I can't abide my staff looking scruffy when we've got the first excursion to hold. If you spray me with that water pipe again, I'll be sure to hand in my notice sooner than expected," threatened Whitehouse. "One shower today is enough for me to last a lifetime." "Still, at least we have a change of clothes," Jane said, taking her parcel. "I'll get changed in my section of the coach." "And I'm sure Corpse won't mind me using his section to change," added Whitehouse, as Cars handed him his parcel. He checked his watch. "What time are we starting this, excursion?" 10 o'clock on the dot," answered Cars, climbing the coach steps. "Oh, and tell Casey and Corpse to have the train in by 9:30. Half an hour's prep work, and then the passengers board, and then we'll be off. Oh, and Harry's asked if he would do something about your blue hair. It doesn't look well for the passengers." "He's got it all planned out, hasn't he?" sighed Jane, as she ascended the steps. "A little too ambitious, if you ask me," Whitehouse added, looking at his blue hair, thinking. "But it seems as if he really wants everything to go accordingly. Best we just let him have his moment, and then we'll try and sort something out for ourselves." "I don't suppose changing from caterer to something more helpful will be among the ideas?" inquired Jane. "Sorry? Oh, nothing. Just, hurry along with your tasks." As Whitehouse jumped down from the coach steps, he was not aware that both he and the others were carefully being monitored by the wall the coach was parked up against. A homemade periscope lowered itself down where Skid and Gears were waiting for the next movement to be made. "Still another 10 minutes, Skid said, checking his watch. "Then we'll make our first move." Before leaving, Frank had given both he, Gears, and Grinder a briefing on how to rustle the feathers of the group, and it wasn't anything Gears or Grinder had ever tackled before. Skid then craned his eyes over to a group of people that were making their way to the station entrance. He fixed on a youngish man wearing a green mac and woolen hat. "That's my way in," he grinned. "What do you plan to do?" inquired Gears. "Just shut up and keep a watch out. We've got to make sure everything goes accordingly." Skid checked his watch again and mimicked a countdown with his fingers. Upon 0, a whistle blew, and Casey backed the train into the platform road. He stepped off the footplate, grinning. "Right then, Rory, while we're waiting for the passengers to board, we can give her another check over to ensure everything is in working order." And I keep telling you, Chris, I've checked the engine over this morning before and after firelighting, so she's going to perform well either way, retorted Corpse grumpily. He was not finding his position as a fireman all that fitting. It doesn't hurt to have another check, assured Casey. Now hop to it while I get her oiled up. Just let me get some water first, he said, moving towards the water tower. At which the coach door to the balcony opened. Whitehouse stepped down in his guard uniform. While a bit dusty and a little rough where the moths had gotten to it, he did look the part of an old railway guard. Not bad, this, he said, brushing off some fluff. Impressive, agreed Corpse. Though there was something different about his cousin, but he couldn't quite make it out. Hey, that looks great on you, Mike, said Casey, coming over to see. And that mixture I gave you for your hair has turned out great. To show what he meant, Whitehouse took off his cap to reveal his hair. By mixing lots of soot and axle grease, Whitehouse was able to make a special hair dye that would hide his Yale blue hair very easily. I just hope it washes off easily, he said. Yes, said Casey, unsure of the outcome. But how did the others turn out? The voice called out. The three turned to see Cars emerging in his uniform. You'd think he was part of a Broadway musical. Dazzling white jacket with jet black trousers pressed to the crease. Gold epaulets hung from his shoulders with matching buttons on his cuffs. Now this is the sort of uniform we should have at the MES, Cars smiled as he stepped over to the lads. Though it might be a bit tricky to prevent coal dust from getting onto it, but I think we'll find an alternative whenever we get back. It'll be more soup stains you have to worry about, Casey said, quivering slightly. Through his coal dust face, Cars could make out that he seemed to have gone a shade of pink. Must have been the heat from the cab that caused it. Well, there's fat chance of me eating anything when I've got a train to manage, he said. What with sorting out the passengers to their seats, ensuring luggage is boarded safely, and making sure there's enough small sachets of butter to put on the plates, added Whitehouse. He stifled a cough. What are you on about? Butter? What are you talking about? Mark, have you done any research in the differences in railway uniforms? Of course I have. You think being the second command of the miniature railway doesn't involve knowing your facts and history about railway fashion? So what exactly did you think this uniform was to signify your role in this excursion? Asked Corpse. Cars sighed as he pointed to his epaulets. These here show I'm in charge, right? Right, the three replied. And by wearing these, I have control of the operations, right? Right. Okay then, now that we've got that sorted, we'll wait till Jane has got her uniform on, and have her load any refreshments that we need to bring for the passengers to buy while on our journey. And be sure to see if there's a tea or a knocking about that we can use. I don't think that's going to happen, Mark. Cars stopped while heading for the platform. He turned slowly. I'm sorry. Do I detect the signs of protest? No, no protest. Just a misunderstanding, said Whitehouse. Oh? Well, that's all right then. For you, that is. You see, I think you're the one who's doing Jane's role. What do you mean? Mark, what do you think your uniform represents? Conductor, of course. Casey couldn't hold back his laughter. Even Corpse had to let loose a few giggles. Cars looked at his uniform more carefully. This is a waiter's uniform, he exclaimed upon realization. At last, the lad's got it, laughed Whitehouse. But there must be some kind of mistake. I must have gotten the wrong uniform. It's no mistake, Wilbert said, walking over. He had heard Cars' outburst and wanted to settle any confusion. Wilbert, I told you that we were going to have a conductor on this train, and you said it was going to happen. And indeed I did, Wilbert said simply. Well then, and I'm sure Jane will do her best. Won't you, dear? He added, looking at the coach. The others turned and stared open-mouthed. Jane stepped down from the coach in her uniform. Gold-lined royal blue jacket and trousers. Boots polished to a high gloss. Brass buttons shone brightly in the sunlight, which were almost as bright as the white gloves she was putting on. Around her front hung a leather ticket satchel, and her long chocolate-brown hair was tied back in a tight bun, which was concealed under a peaked cap, which completed the outfit. What do you think? Jane asked, giving them a small twirl. You look amazing, gasped Casey. Stunning, agreed Whitehouse. Like someone in charge, added Corpse. Even Cars had to admit she did look really good in a uniform, but he was still concerned about the whole role change. Are you sure Jane can handle the task, Wilbert? She's never even managed to train before. I'm sure Jane will manage just fine, Mark. Just give her a chance and let her prove what she can do. And besides, he added in passing, you look as if you could do it for change yourself. Cars glared at Wilbert as he looked at his uniform again. Waiter, he muttered hotly. to think it's come to this. Wilbert walked over and smiled warmly at Jane. You look fine, my dear, he said. I'm sure you'll find the role a challenge, but be sure to take deep breaths and keep calm. But also, he said, whispering so Cars couldn't hear, make sure you prove to your friend that you can do other jobs than what you usually do. Here. He placed something in her hand, to which she looked at it carefully. It was a small tube whistle. It was my daughter's, but I'd like you to have it as a sort of good luck charm for your big challenge. Look after it for me. Thank you, Wilbert. Jane smiled and gave him a hug. Now, off you go and do your best. Remember, anything that goes wrong, be sure to report it back to me. So mind you keep to your posts, and for your own safety, keep low so any of the soldiers get suspicious of your roles. Let's get to it, said Cars, going into full leader mode. Chris, Roy, get that engine ready for departure. Mike, have the train checked over before leaving, and... Mark, said Wilbert, placing his hand on his shoulder. Catering staff are to see to their jobs, not ordering everyone to theirs. Now, if you would let Jane do her job... Cars reluctantly stepped aside as Jane took his place. She looked at the others, who in turn awaited their instructions. Okay. Well, I know from your own experience back at home that you know what roles are to be carried out, so go to it, and I'm sure we can make this our first excursion the best this poor town has ever known. All right? Let's go. Here we go, the three cheered as they hurried to their posts. Wilbert patted Jane on the back, grinning. Good start so far, he said, and headed on to the station platform. Cars walked up and caught Jane by the arm as she was about to head on. Just be careful when you go about this, Jane. Back home you're not used to this kind of work. And for starters, that prep talk is not one of the most professional prep talks you say to your staff. Oh, hush up, Mark. I can manage fine, said Jane, retrieving her arm from his grasp. Just let me have this chance to prove to you that I can do other work besides catering. I've been longing to do something like this. You never mentioned this before. I've been trying to do this line of work for ages. Have you not noticed? Honestly, you need to pay more attention to your staff in future, Mark. And speaking of which, I can see that you're not on your post at this excursion, so hurry up and sort out what refreshments we can spare for this train. Cars glared at Jane before he ascended the platform ramp to the storerooms. Jane watched him walk by, then stifled a laugh before getting herself into the act. This was it, her first big break in a long time. Her grandparents would be so proud of her if they saw her in this uniform. And then a sudden thought about her own parents. If they were still alive, would they be proud of her in a uniform? A shrill test whistle from the engine brought her round, and she hurried over to the station entrance. I'll be surprised if anyone turns up to this, really, said Harry, as he stood by Wilbert. He tipped his hat to Jane as she hurried up to the main gate. Well, we'll just have to wait and see, won't we? She said. And at the strike of opening time, she unlocked the gate and opened it with a welcoming smile. Welcome to our day excursion. I hope you'll enjoy it as much as we will running it for you. The four people waiting there weren't so enthusiastic as Jane or Cars hoped they would. The first two were an elderly couple, but the wife spoke with a strict entitled attitude you'd think you'd seen it in one of those reality programs where they think the world revolves around them. You girl, I take it that this is the egg curtain that was advertised for today? It is indeed, ma'am, and it will hopefully be the first of many should it go according to plan. How delightful, the response came with a sickening displeasure. If there's one thing that disagrees with me, it's more than one thing. Isn't that right, Gerald? She hates more than one thing, the husband echoed obediently. And of course, there's the noise and smoke of the engines that runs the atmosphere too. Isn't that right, Gerald? She hates the noise and smoke of the engines, for it ruins the atmosphere, the husband echoed. Jane could easily tell that everything had to be exactly to the wife's satisfaction. This was going to be a challenge for sure, but that wasn't going to put a downer on things. Well, if you'd like to come this way, you can get your tickets and I'll escort you to your... I don't need any escort, girl, the wife said hotly. Gerald does all that for me. Isn't that so, Gerald? She don't need any escort, Gerald said. There was a thud as his wife cudgelled him on the head with her umbrella. She doesn't need an escort, Gerald. I've told you before about not talking properly. What did I tell you? About not talking properly, dear, Gerald responded in pained tones as he took his wife's hand to the ticket window. Wouldn't like to invite them to a dinner party, muttered Jane. As she turned to greet the next passenger, she got a face full of crating feathers. Chickens clucked wildly as the farmer thrust them upon her. I wants these here heads taken to market, and I wants them there by noon. I don't think we can arrange that at this current moment, sir, Jane exclaimed, trying to control the lively package in her grasp. If you could perhaps come back tomorrow, we can arrange for them to be placed on a...
I wants them on this here train today, the farmer responded firmly, and I takes no no's for answers, so there.
And with that, he left Jane with the crate and stomped out of the gate. Jane stood there with the crate and looked over to Wilbert and Harry, who in return looked a little concerned. Harry gave a gesture to offer some help, but Jane caught Cars's glance as he and Alice were bringing out some boxes onto the train. She stood her ground and calmly rejected the offer with a shake of her head. Mike, can you place these, special cargo in the luggage van till we reach the end of the line? I'll get Mark to bring breadcrumbs to tie them over till then. Whitehouse obediently took charge of the hens and headed over to the train. Relieved that the problem was solved, Jane turned to greet the last passenger. He was a youngish gentleman with a green mac and black woolen hat. I thought I'd come and show support, he said kindly. He looked embarrassed. Jane at first wasn't sure what he should be embarrassed about until she looked down at her uniform. Feathers and muck had come off from the crate and had stuck to her tunic. Want me to take over while you get cleaned up, Jane? Offers Cars supportively. No, I can manage fine, Mark. Just see to your tasks, please. If it helps, I sometimes carry a spare hanky with me if you want to wipe away those stains, the young man said. Jane kindly declined, but thanked him for the offer. You'd better hurry and get your ticket, she said, to which man made his way over. A slightly rough beginning, but no matter, Jane thought. She felt a prod as she looked round to find the couple from earlier standing by her. Well, don't stand about there idling, girl. Take us to our coach, the wife ordered. Her attention then diverted to the feathers and mud stains on Jane's uniform. Disgraceful way of presenting yourself before passengers, girl. Makes us all feel as if we're common peasants or something. Isn't that right, Gerald? Like peasants, dear, the husband echoed plainly. Though, if it helps, a bit of hot soapy water should sift it, he added helpfully. Don't offer help, you fool! That's her job, his wife retorts. If she's ever done one properly, she added coldly. She pointed over to where Cars was loading the last of the refreshments onto the train. There's someone who's doing their job without making a mess. Perhaps he would do your job better than you. Jane's eyes twitched slightly, but remained calm. I can assure you, ma'am, that I will be doing my job accordingly and will ensure that you and all our passengers get the top quality service they deserve. Was the only response that Jane got as she led her ungrateful couple over to the train. Whitehouse had safely placed the hens in his compartment out of the way and was getting his flags from the storeroom. The young gentleman hurried up to him. Sorry, you don't know what time this train is leaving at? He asked. In about 5 minutes, sir, Whitehouse replied, checking his watch. Ah, good. Just enough time to do, well, he said, nodding to the gents, at which Whitehouse nodded jovially. Better be quick, though, he called after him. Here, Jane, there's some hot water in the canteen if you want to use that to wipe that muck off your tunic, Alice said kindly, and escorted her to the canteen. They passed Cars on his way back to the train. 2 minutes, he said hurriedly. I know, Jane frantically responded. With there still being activity on the platform, it would be too risky for Skid to set foot in it by going through the main gate. However, he had thought about this and remembered that the gents' main window had a loose catch which sometimes caused it to open on windy days. With Gears giving a look out outside, he crept in and to the stall where the young gentleman had gone to. There was a scuffle, a whack, and a muffled groan before Skid reappeared again, this time donning the man's woolly hat and green mac. Right, hand me the gear and I'll sneak it into his coat, he said. Then meet up with Grinder at checkpoint 7 for phase 2. Now scram! Gears hurried off and jumped on the small moped the workshops had given Skid till a new bike could be made for him. It was sheer embarrassment to ride such a puny little thing, but there was nothing else left until some new material from the scrapyards arrived for new machines to be made. Skid hurried out and collided with Jane just as she was coming out of the canteen. Oh, sorry, Jane said. Then Skid recognised her, but pretended not to. Oh, it's all right, Toots. Happens all the time round me, he said, and hurried to board the train. Strange, Jane thought, watching after him. He seems to have changed his tone slightly. Jane, are we all set? Called Whitehouse. What? Said Jane, looking around. The clock was just starting to chime the hour of 10. Oh, yes, right, go! She means right away, Mike, calls Cars from the carriage window. I know what I mean, Jane snapped, as Whitehouse gave Casey the signal. Here we go, says Casey, and opened the regulator. Jets of steam blasted out from the cylinders as the old engine groaned as the couplings tightened. There was silence. Everyone looked out of the carriage windows in case something had gone wrong. There came a chuff, beat, hiss, beat, chuff. The train jerked slightly. Traction was taking hold. With groaning of axles turning, the train slowly began to depart from the station. Jane watched with amazement. In spite of the situation the group were in, the sight of a steam engine departing from a station always helps relieve one of trouble. "Come on, Jane," calls Whitehouse, as Jane realizes she too had to board the train. Whitehouse held out his hand as she took it before jumping on board, the wind blowing through her hair as she and Whitehouse watched on as their coach left the platform. Wilbert, Harry and Alice stood by, waving them away. "Here's wishing good luck to them," said Alice.
"They'll need it if they're going to try and hide out here from Frank," Harry said. "I just hope things don't go wrong if he finds out things about them being here."
"Then if it happens, we'll just have to take it as it said. But despite my views on that young Mark, he did put that troublemaker Skid in his place yesterday, so there's a hope that some good fortune might come about. Well, all this isn't getting any work done around here. How's about a brew of some tea?" offers Alice, and made her way back to the canteen.
"Aye, that sounds lovely, Alice," smiled Harry.
He watched as the train rounded the curve and under the road bridge. He frowned.
"I still think there could be trouble in store for those kids," he stated.
Now, Wilbert said, turning and walking alongside. "So far, things have gone fine. Granted, a small hiccup with those hens, but young Jane put a brave face and saw through the operation quite well. If any trouble were to happen, it would have happened now." A scream from Alice caused the two men to hurry towards the canteen, where they found her exclaiming by the toilets. Before them slumped the young gentleman, bound, gagged, and with a large gash on his head where he had been struck. He had just come round in his stall where he was attacked and had tried to hobble out to get help, at which he bumped into Alice.
"What happened?"
asked Harry when he removed the gag.
"Was jumped by a young hoodlum," the man gasped. "Took my coat and hat and did this to me."
"But we saw you board the train before it left," said Wilbert. "But if you're here, then who's on the train?" Chapter 8. Jane in Charge. Onwards through the countryside the excursion went. Steam hissed in steady rhythms as Casey manned the controls. He was enjoying every moment of this. If only Ellie could see him now. Boy, would she be jealous. He leaned out of the cab window and smiled as the warm morning sunlight shone on his face while the gentle breeze brushed his cheeks. Beside him, Corpse struggled to keep the steam pressure up. Shovel after shovel, he heaped coal from the tender into the firebox, perspiring to the extreme. After another 10, he paused to wipe his brow.
"Can't you take over for a bit, Chris?" he gasped. "I need to get a breather."
"Sorry, Roy, but it's not my role to do that," Casey replied simply. "The fireman deals with the fire, as stated in the job title. I'm the driver, and so I'm required to drive."
Well, how much more coal do we need now? Just so I can give myself some energy."
There was a bang as they hit a rough spot in the tracks.
I can't say until I'm familiar myself with the line,"
Casey replied, keeping a steady speed. "Just keep shoveling and I'll tell you when." Whoa! Another rough spot caused the engine to lurch violently and sent the two crew members crashing to the cab floor.
"Maybe try running the engine a little slower on the way back," Corpse groaned. "Provided we get to the end of the line in one piece."
Climbing back into his seat and taking the controls again, Casey silently agreed. How did these guys manage this line with such bad track work? He thought to himself as they approached the viaduct. The viaduct was a tall, stone-built structure stretching across a deep gorge. Corpse looked over the cab side and took in the drop that lay before him. Muttering a small prayer to guide them to the other side, he resumed his work. There must have been another line that had been planned for this section, thought Casey. He could just about make out a set of points in the opposite direction, leading off towards an extension work site, which looked as if it had been abandoned for some time. How many man-hours did it take to build this structure? Given the situation the railway and the townsfolk were in, another thought came to his head. How many lives were lost building this? Jane was making her way from the guards van along the railed coaches to see, though not wanting to, if the husband and wife would require some light refreshment that would help make their journey better. As she crossed the balcony gateway to the compartment coach, she crossed paths with Cars on his way to the buffet coach.
There you are, he exclaimed. Where were you? Those folks have been asking constantly for you.
I was at the other end of the train, Jane explained.
Well, you've no business to be. You're the conductor, and you ought to be at the point where the passengers are.
Well, where do you think I'm going to? Jane retorted crossly. Mark, just let me do my job and you do yours. I see the buffet is without staff, she pointed, giving him a get-to-your-post look. Just watch it, Cars said coldly as he passed her. This sudden attitude of yours is getting on my nerves. No difference from when you were in charge, Jane muttered when Cars was out of hearing range. She then took a glance down over the edge of the balcony into the depths of the dark cavern. A cold chill descended on her as the sudden height made her legs turn into jelly. After taking several encouraging intakes of air to steady herself, she made her way to the other coach and towards the couple's compartment.
Ah, there you are, girl, the wife rudely exclaimed when Jane opened the compartment door. About time you showed up. I thought we were going to be waiting for days.
Do you require some refreshment? Asked Jane, as kindly as she could.
You will bring me a highly decaf coffee with 3 sugars and low-fat milk, the wife instructed.
And if there is the confectional form of a digestive biscuit, I'm sure temptation will be succumbed within my persona. And what would your husband like? Jane asked with a smile. She really hoped that would get a laugh, as she could tell that they weren't enjoying the excursion one bit. Her hopes for a small crack of a smile were dashed as the wife coldly gave her a stern look.
He'll have a peppermint tea, won't you, Gerald?
I'll have a peppermint tea, the husband echoed obediently.
Please?
Please.
Any began Jane. No, came the firm reply from the wife. And he'd also want a copy of today's paper too. The sight of the blurred countryside going by does hell with his vision. Now look sharp, girl, and get us those things.
What a woman, Jane muttered quietly. She was just about to go to the buffet when the thought of Casey and Corpse working on the engine got her thinking. They could do with refreshments too, and so could Whitehouse. She wanted to show that she cared for her teammates, and with hope they might consider her to be a team player in their group. Cars wouldn't have thought about that while back at the MES. Reciting the list of the items required for the couple, she made her way to the buffet. Skid had already found his way there and had already ordered a coffee, or something that looked like coffee. Not even the slaves back at the fort could make something as rancid as this. He sat by the window with an old newspaper in hand and pretended to read it. He kept his eyes focused on the door for Jane to come back. An exclamation of frustration was heard as he looked over to where Cars was trying to sort out making a fresh pot of coffee. Back home, he got either his coffee at one of those drive-by cafes or from Jane. So to try and make an espresso tech-free was something Cars had to figure out for himself. Also, how much coffee was enough to put into a cup? He decided 4 tablespoons was enough to put into the pot and started to add the hot water. It shouldn't be too strong. He prepared the pot and brought it over to Skid. "Can I top up your coffee, sir?" he asked.
No,
Skid gruffed, putting on an accent to disguise his own. Though with the overdose of the coffee, his voice would have sounded much more lively if he hadn't fought back the sheer amounts of caffeine coursing through his system. The door opened and Skid's eyes darted towards Jane, who just entered.
"Hello, gorgeous."
"Oh, bored already?" mused Cars. "Ready to swap roles at last?" "Actually, no," Jane smiled. "I need 1 decaf coffee with 3 sugars and low-fat milk, as well as a peppermint tea and 2 digestive biscuits." Cars set the coffee pot down and looked through the contents of the cupboards for any biscuits. Jane eyed the pot carefully. Already she knew that Cars had put far too much coffee granules in it, for it was black as night, and from a guess was thick as syrup. While Cars had his back turned, Jane carefully and silently opened the coffee tin and scooped a small amount of decaf coffee into a cup.
"Ah, here we are," Cars said, bringing up a box.
Though the biscuits looked more like wooden coasters upon inspection.
Maybe worth suggesting they dunk them into their drinks to stuff them up," he said.
He noticed the cup with the granules in. Did he put those there? Shrugging, Cars filled the cup up with hot water, and then after setting another cup ready, went to see about finding some peppermint. Jane, meanwhile, carefully placed 2 worthy-looking biscuits onto a plate and put some milk and 3 sugars into the coffee cup. She looked over and noticed that Skid had been watching her. She smiled heartily, to which he returned the smile. Only this one made Jane react slightly. Probably her tired eyes, but she could have sworn the face looked familiar.
Have you seen any peppermint? Cars asked. The boy was hopeless, Jane thought, turning back. She took her cap and gloves off, placed them carefully next to the 2 cups, and went to help Cars with the search. Skid saw his chance, and when he was sure they weren't taking any notice of him, stepped out of his seat and walked over to the doorway by the counter. He took a small vial tube out of his pocket and tipped its contents carefully into the other cup. The contents was a whitish powder and was well hidden at the bottom of the white cup to anyone handling it. Then carefully, Skid slipped the vial into one of Jane's gloves and made his way out the coach. Jane looked up from the counter as she heard the door close. That fellow from the other side of the coach must have left. She was sure she saw that face from somewhere before, but where? Well, we don't seem to have any, Carr said, standing up. They best have regular tea instead. Send my deepest apologies, as supplies are low at the moment. It would be better if you said it yourself if you'd seen the wife, Jane muttered. Now, Carr said. That's no way to talk about our fellow passengers. It's our job to ensure they have a nice, comfortable ride. The coach lurched as they hit another bad spot. Both Cars and Jane held onto the counter to stabilize themselves, while boxes, tins, cups and saucers tumbled off the shelves and hit the floor. Jane just managed to save the couple's cups from going over the side of the counter. Though she had known what was inside one of them, she would have let it fall. "What is that blinking pufferhead doing up front?" exclaimed Cars. "I'm going to have to tell him to ease off the speed." "No," Jane said firmly. "I'm in charge. I'll see to it. You just stay here and man the buffet. That is your job, after all." "But I know how to handle situations like this," Cars began, but Jane stood firm. "Casey hears you speaking, Mark. He listens to me," she said. That stopped him. He stood there blinking as Jane picked up her hat and the tray. "I'll leave these on my way up," she added, gathering up her things to leave. "And please keep this place in good order. Thanks." Further down the line, outside the tunnel, Grinder was lying in wait for the train to arrive. His instructions were to wait for gears to arrive before they could make their next move. He spent some time flicking rocks at a stone tower, a game he used to play as a kid. He had just managed to miss the tower for the 7th time when the sounds of a moped approaching could be heard. Poking his head above the tall line-side grass, Grinder saw gears heading towards them. "All set," he said, jumping off. "About as set as I'll ever be," Grinder noted. "Do you think this plan of Frank's will work? I mean, it's not really destructive from what we've done in the past." "Skid is the one who's doing the main task while we're just the trainees," Gears explained. He checked his watch. "The train should be here in just under 2 minutes. Have you got those cutters ready?" "Sharpened and ready to go." "Right. We better start now and scarp up before they see us," Gears said. Carefully making their way across the line, they stopped under the old signal. It didn't take much for the brothers to cut the old wire controlling the arm, nor did it take much for the heavy weight of the signal's base to drop and land on top of Grinder's foot. "Ouch!" he yelled, hopping about clutching with his hands. Gears had also taken injury from the task too. The tension on the wire caused it to whip back and snap against his face. He clutched it in pain, fearing it would leave a mark. A large, long red mark ran right down the side of his right-hand side, just missing his eye. Grinder tapped his foot on the ground several times to check in case if it was broken. He looked up and jumped back in alarm upon seeing his brother's face. "What?" Gears asked. Nothing," Grinder said. He'd hoped it wouldn't leave a scar, as Gears was very fond of his face. They could hear the sound of the engine approaching and dashed off to hide. Casey was starting to recognize his surroundings. Yes, he was sure that they were approaching the spot where their adventure first started. The old signal by the tunnel was coming up. Its arm was up in the danger position. "Signal's up," he called to Corpse, and applied the brakes. The two fell about the cab as the brakes were applied. While some of the railway stock were in bad need of repairs, the Irish giant had very good brakes installed. It stopped violently, sending the carriages clattering into each other. Whitehouse was thrown across his compartment and crashed into the crate of chickens. Feathers filled the air as the birds went mad. In the buffet coach, everything had been thrown about even more, but thankfully the couple's drinks were saved once again by Jane, who managed to keep them well balanced on the tray. Cars, meanwhile, was picking himself up from being buried under bits of broken crockery. "What does that bloody fool up front think he's playing at?" he fumed. He advanced to the door. "I'll go," said Jane. "I'm in charge." "Not from this stage," Cars replied scornfully. "I'm taking over as of now until we're underway again. Just you make sure the passengers are all right." He stormed out.
Jane sighed as she tied herself up. Then she noticed that the gentleman from earlier appeared to have left his newspaper behind. That was handy. She picked it up, smoothed out the creases, and placed it on the tray for the couple. Casey and Corpse watched on as the signal remained as it was. Cars stormed up. "What's all this?" he demanded. "Signal's against us," stated Casey and pointed. Cars looked on inside. "Oh, it just had to happen now," he grumbled. He could hear footsteps coming from behind him, and he looked round to see Whitehouse covered in birch droppings and feathers. "What the—" he began. "Don't ask," Whitehouse cut in. He was not in the mood to state the obvious. "How long have we been waiting, Chris?" he called up. "About 5 minutes, but surely they would have known about us coming." Corpse pondered about this. "Are there signal boxes along this section? I didn't see one when we left the station earlier." "There's a point," thought Cars. "I suppose we'll have to wait until they give us the go-ahead." "And it just had to happen now," he sighed again, as he and Whitehouse walked back to the train. The wife was in no mood to hear Jane's reasons for the abrupt stop. "It's shocking how you let things go on like this," she thundered. Her husband decided to take this moment to take the paper Jane had given him, and after swigging his mug of tea, glanced at the latest news. So far, he found the journey quite good. If only his wife would just shut up for once. Where'd that thought come from? And what was going on with his paper? All the writings seemed to be melting. Was it getting a little warm in here? "But, madam, how could I have known that the train was going to stop like this? Such incompetence," the wife fumed. "I will complain to the manager about this and have you withdrawn." "If it helps, I can have the driver come and explain the situation with you personally," Jane said. She was trying hard to keep her cool. "It's times like this I wish we didn't come on this trip," the wife said scornfully. "Then why did you?" Jane thought to herself. The wife then turned to her husband. "Don't you agree with me, Gerald? Gerald? Gerald, answer me when I'm talking to you." Her husband remained unmoved. He kept his paper held up, covering his face. But there was something about him that seemed off. Looking more closely, Jane could see that he was vibrating at an amazing rate. The corners of the paper jutted slightly, and traces of sweat were perspiring along the tips of his fingers as he held the paper's edges for dear life. Something was very wrong here. "I said answer me, Gerald!" the wife yelled, and thrust the paper away. Then she screamed. Her screams alerted Cars and Whitehouse, who had just passed in the coach on their way back. They ran to the balcony steps and raced along the corridor as the sound of broken glass met their ears. Skid took this moment to quietly slip away from the train while they were being distracted. Phase 2 of the operation had gone to plan, now for preparing for Phase 3, but that was going to come later. In the meantime, he would have to leave the group to their misfortune. Cars and Whitehouse burst into the compartment to find Jane and the wife huddled in a corner. The husband was standing at the other end of the compartment. A large shard of glass was held tightly in his hand, which was gushing out streams of blood. "He's gone mad!" cried Jane. "Hey!" called Cars. The husband turned slowly. His face was all white and his eyes hollowed into his skull. His pupils had grown in size and were bloodshot to near bursting. He glared at the two with his mouth foaming at the corners. "Hey, so we're going to calmly put the glass shard down now?" Carr said calmly. The man stared at him. Cars and Whitehouse tried to give him signals as to lowering the shard, but in his mind, they were doing what he believed to be preparing to charge at him. "You'll never take me alive!" he screamed and lunged forwards. Whitehouse and Cars split up, causing the man to stumble into the corridor. He gathered himself up before darting in Cars' direction. Jane jumped to her feet and tried to follow them, but she was pulled back by the wife. "You did this to him with all your carelessness, you stupid bitch!" she yelled. The slap came more of a shock to her than it did to Jane. She blinked several times. "I had nothing to do with this," Jane said firmly, "and I've had enough of your complaining. Now, if you want your husband to come to his senses, I suggest you stay here, sit still, and shut up! Is that too much to ask?" The wife just stared at Jane as she slowly lowered herself to the seat. "Mike, look after her and make sure she doesn't go anywhere," Jane instructed. "But where are you going?" Whitehouse asked, but Jane had already sprinted after Cars and the husband. "I think we should go on carefully and inquire at the box if we see one," Corpse suggested. "I suppose you're right," Casey agreed, and he opened the regulator.
Slowly the train made its way into the tunnel. A short distance away, a moped with a combination sidecar raced away towards the sleepy grey coastlines of Antwerp. Cars had just made it into the buffet coach when the husband caught up with him. In his mind, he saw Cars as a hairy, mucus-drooling rat that he knew his wife would hate. It had to be killed. "Now I've got you, you filthy rat!" he growled. "Now, let's be reasonable," said Cars, finding something to shield himself with. Then everything went black. There came a scuffle and a crash as the husband tried to jump him. Cars ducked as the man leapt through the air and crashed through a tabletop. He picked himself up, fighting back the amount of pain and the drowsiness of blood lost in his hand. Cars had taken the chance to hide behind the counter in hopes to grab him while he walked past. Then he heard the door to the coach open and shut. That could be Whitehouse coming to help. Good. 2 against 1. Should be easy enough. "Mark!" called Jane. "Where are you?" "Shit!" Cars didn't dare say a word. He could sense the husband was somewhere close to him. If only he could get Jane away before he could... Jane felt her way around and bumped into something. "Mark, is that you?" she asked. "Where'd that freak get to?" "Freak, am I?" a voice in the darkness questioned. Jane screamed as the husband turned and lunged at her. She tripped on something behind her and fell on her back, banging her head against the floor. "Where did that witch get to?" the husband thought to himself. She was right behind him, the sneaky old hag. Well, it'll take more than darkness to catch him out. Blinded by the kaleidoscope of colours swirling through his vision, he was unaware of Cars sneaking out from the counter. Just as Cars was about to jump him, the train was out of the tunnel and the sunlight caught them off guard. Seeing Cars running for him, the husband ducked and Cars toppled over him and hit the floor hard. "You wait your turn, my laddo," the husband said. Then he saw Jane lying on the ground, close by. He still had the shard of glass in his hand. Jane came round and stared in horror as the doped-up husband towered over her. The blood on his hand was now oozing like sauce from a bottle. If he could take this witch out, then he'll give in to his unconsciousness. Jane screamed. Cars looked up in time to see the shard plunge into Jane's chest. She let out a choked gasp. "No!" he screamed and lunged again. He collided with the husband, sending him stumbling across the floor, and with a bang, hit his head against the counter's edge. He dropped to the floor out cold. Cars gathered himself up before running over to Jane. She lay there, with her eyes wide open in shock. "Jane, can you hear me?" Jane blinked several times before looking down at her chest. The blood-stained shard looked back at her, with the blood dribbling onto her jacket. Then she looked at Cars. Just keep still, Jane, while I try and get it out," he said, panicking. But just as he tried to grab it, Jane pushed him away. "You're hurt, Jane! I have to get it out!" exclaimed Cars. But Jane still resisted. Confused as to what she was doing, Cars watched on as she sat up and shakily unbuttoned her jacket. Her ticket satchel slid down from underneath with the glass shard following. It had taken the full blow of the force. A little further in, and the shard would have punctured her heart. Cars sighed with relief. There was a scream, and the two looked up to see the wife standing by the doorway, staring at her unconscious husband. "Gerald!" she screamed. Whitehouse ran in after her. "I couldn't stop her," he gasped. "What have they done to you?" the wife whimpered as she cradled her husband's head in her arms. "He's lost a lot of blood," said Cars, standing up. "Jane, can you help with his injuries?" "She will not!" thundered the wife, looking up. Her eyes became red as rage ran through her system. "After the way she treated us, not to mention striking me down whilst I was concerned for my husband's sake?" Cars looked at Jane, puzzled. "I was only... That is, she became too hysterical to control," she stammered. The shock from the whole ordeal now slowly started to come to effect on her. Cars looked at Whitehouse, who shrugged. He thought about what to do. "Okay, I'll see to his injuries. Mike, take Jane to give her some space and make sure she's all right. I'll talk about this later." "But don't you want any..." Jane started. "No," Cars said firmly. "And I'm relieving you of your duties for the rest of this trip. Now just get some rest." Whitehouse took Jane gently by the arm and escorted her back to his guard's compartment, while Cars dug out the first aid box and tried what he could to help stop the bleeding. The seaside town of Antwerp came into view, though the Jolly Days excursion wasn't greeted by the welcome it hoped it would. A group of soldiers stood on the platform as Casey brought the Irish giant to a stop. They stormed the train and hauled the crew out from their cab. Skid stepped forwards as the rest of the gang were brought before him. So, this is the excursion we heard so much about, he mused. Cars glared at him while the guards held him and the others back. Not quite the haul you were expecting, was it? Though, from what we can see, it seems it was quite the journey, especially for your only passengers. 2 soldiers were escorting the shaking couple away from the station, the husband jittering and mumbling inaudible forms of speech in his drugged-up state. "Oh, don't worry about them," Skid remarked, seeing the concerned look on the group's faces. "They'll be taken care of. They say a day at the seaside does wonders for the soul. Though I have to congratulate on your ways of getting them into that state. I don't suppose even us could think of something so imaginative." "We didn't do anything to them," Carr said coldly, but Skid was ready for this comeback. "Oh, really? And I suppose your friend here could explain why she wanted to drug her customers?" "Oh, yes. I saw everything." "You?" exclaimed Whitehouse. "But how could you—" But he stopped as one of the soldiers brought Skid the Mac and hat he had stolen from the man earlier. "Call it keeping a trained eye," he said. "I saw it all. How she arranged the cups while you had your back turned, making sure it appeared that you had prepped them." Cars looked at Jane to confirm and was horrified to see her nodding. "She wouldn't," he gasped. "But I did," Jane said quietly. "But I didn't know that there was—" "And she admits it!" Skid laughed, to which the rest of the soldiers joined in. He snapped his fingers, to which the soldier stepped over to Jane and searched her jacket before withdrawing her now torn white gloves. The glass vial slid out of one of them and smashed on the platform. The others stared in shock, no more, though, than Jane. They looked back at her. "I didn't, though," she exclaimed. "Well, now," Skid said, "if I'd known any better, I'd say that vial contained something that would have put that poor chap into the sorry state he was in now. But as it's now smashed all over the platform, preventing any chances of proving that to be true, I'd say we have no further need to look into this case any further. Oh," he added, stopping while turning away, "and by order of our leader Frank, any excursions are to be used only for the soldiers' needs, and not for the general peasants. All goods and stock brought here all come under our care. I'm sure you can let old Billy know about that when you return." Several of the soldiers stumped past, carrying crates of food, drink, and several dead chickens. "Now hold on!" Cars exclaimed, stepping forwards. Several armed weapons pointed in his and the group's direction. He paused. "Yes?" inquired Skid. "What about the couple? We have to return them home," said Jane. A distant splash from the nearby cliffs made the blood from the group run cold, as the soldiers who were with the couple returned alone. "Oh, I don't think they want to come back with you, Toots," mused Skid, grinning. "And besides, I've already stated that they've already been taken care of. At least, they had something else on their minds before they went for a dip. Safe travels back." And with a roar from their bikes' engines, the soldiers and Skid departed. Cars stared on, watching them go, and cursed. "Bastards," he muttered. "Cold-hearted bastards, the lot of them." He kicked the broken glass shards away in anger as he slumped back to the train. "I didn't do those things, though, Mark," Jane called after him. Carr stopped. The others watched to see what he'd do next. But Cars just gave a sigh and boarded the train without saying another word. Jane looked heartbroken as she turned to Whitehouse. "I swear, I didn't know, Mike. You've got to believe me." "Well, Jane, everything was happening at once, and you did strike that woman." "She had it coming. I mean, she was hysterical. I had to. That is to say, I didn't mean to, and now they're—" I know, Jane," Whitehouse said, placing his hand on her shoulder. "We'll not speak of this until we get back and explain everything to Harry and Wilbert. I don't know what they'll think of it all, but let's just get out of here. Chris, Roy," he nodded to Casey and Corpse, who agreed. "We might have to stop by the tunnel on the way back," Corpse said, "just to make sure everything's okay with the tech." Whitehouse nodded and escorted Jane back to the train. Casey uncoupled the coaches and ran the loco around to haul the train back. Something he'd seen in the group before they left got him thinking. It was unlikely, but possible. He could have sworn he'd seen grinding gears amongst them. If they had arrived here and got mixed up with those lot, then what troubles could come their way next? It was a proud group of bikers that returned to the fort. Slaves scattered to safety as they wheelied through the corridors and skidded to a stop by the banquet hall, where Frank sat waiting. His body had now started to wither a little more than before, as he now had the appearance of a 70-year-old. "A pleasing turnout?" he inquired. "Very pleasing," Skid whooped. "You should have seen the look on their faces when their passengers ended up in the permanent drink. That scheme of yours to drug one of them to go doolally was just a work of pure genius, sir." "Indeed, it was genius," Frank mused. He poured himself another drink. "Only it wasn't my idea. The real genius you have to thank is Gears here." "What?" Skid questioned, spinning round on the spot. Gears stepped off the moped and bowed before Frank. "It went perfectly," he said. "Though I kind of wish Skid hadn't requested for the couple to be, disposed of. They were already doing a fine job giving the group trouble that it would have been even more amusing to let them live and have them travel back." "I agree," Frank said. "If it breaks but still proves worthy for the task, then let it continue its work until it fully ceases to function. You've learned well for a newcomer, Gears, and that mark that you've obtained really does make you one of the gang." "Mark?" Gears inquired, and felt his face. He knew he felt more sore than he feared. "And I believe your brother, too, has also done wonders to help," Frank continued. "I only cut a wire," Grinder admitted. "But one that ensured the plan went as followed. And for your dedication, I say a reward is called for. For Gears, I offer you a personal slave of your choice. I'll have some brought up for you to pick." "Actually, sir," Gears said, "I was wondering if I could ask for Miranda to be my slave girl. I feel she is more, manageable for me, sir." Frank ran his fingers through his goatee beard. "I'm sorry, but I've grown very accustomed to her, and I doubt she'd like to part with me, would you, Miranda?" "Well," Miranda hesitated. A growl from Cyril close by made her jump. "I'm happy to serve you, sir," she said. Worth a try, thought Gears, and remained quiet. "And what say you, Grinder?" Frank offered. Grinder looked across in the direction of the sounds of revving close by. "I don't suppose there's a chance for me to have my own custom racer?" he asked. Frank smiled. "I can definitely see your passion for our racing championship on Wednesdays in full bloom. Granted, we are low on supplies, but I'll have it arranged for yourself and Gears to join Cyril's group to the smelting plant this evening to drop off the metal ore, as well as the unwanted materials." He turned to Cyril standing close by in the shadows. "You have everything from that machine loaded and ready for the off?" Cyril nodded to the sound that sounded like two stone slabs rubbing against each other. It sent a shiver down Gears' spine. "And now I think some refreshment is called for, Miranda," Frank announced, snapping his fingers. He winced as a wave of pain shoots through his system. Cyril hurried over to examine his master. He had broken a finger and thumb upon snapping them. Frank looked at them before swearing with frustration. Reaching back, he pressed down on one of the syringes that held the small doses of the youth serum. Instantly, his body went back a few years, and with a cracking snap, his fingers were restored. "I've got to be more careful," Frank muttered. "Have the slaves work harder to find a way to mass-produce this stuff." Cyril nodded and made his way out of the room. "I believe I made a request, Miranda," Frank said, after recovering. Miranda bowed and scurried away. "Come to my side, boys," Frank offered the two, "and share with me more ideas on how we can make things more difficult for that unfortunate group." As the brothers discussed and shared some suggestions, Skid slowly made his way out of the room. Not once did Frank ever consider him worthy of a place by his side, nor even congratulated him for his work in the plan. He did most of the work, after all, and those two troublemakers have gone taking his chances of making himself Frank's right-hand man, after Cyril. Well, those two will have to watch themselves if he has anything to do with it. "I shan't be a moment," called Corpse, jumping down from the cab. "Do be quick, though," calls Casey. Jane and Whitehouse watched him run past the coach and up the embankment by the tunnel. Jane looked at the line-side grass at a wilting primrose. Her chance to prove herself to cars had all gone wrong, and to make it worse for them, it cost them the lives of two passengers. She didn't mean to strike the wife when she went hysterical, but what else could she have done? And the husband's behaviour. Was there something in the tea that made him the way she acted? Did she make it wrong? How would they break the news to Wilbert and Harry? She promised Wilbert that she'd do her best, and now look where it got herself and the others. The compartment door slipped open, and Carr stepped in. "Can I have a moment with Jane, Mike?" he asked. Whitehouse nodded and quietly slipped out. Jane continued looking out of the window as Carr sat down opposite her. "Are you okay?" he asked. Silence. "Look, I know what happened wasn't what either of us had expected to happen. I just wanted to know, did you do anything to that couple's drinks before the whole episode happened? Just so I can report it to Harry and Wilbert." "I only prepped the drinks, Mark," Jane said quietly. A tear rolled down her cheek, to which she brushed it away quickly. "And you struck the wife of the husband who attacked us," Cars added. "Is that true?" Jane remained quiet, but gently nodded. "I see," Carr sighed. He stood up and sat next to her. "I knew she was treating you badly, and she had no right to, especially when it was your first chance to help out." Jane looked at her feet. "I just wish I had the chance to say sorry," she whimpered. "And now they're..." "I know," Carr said. "And I'll also mention this to Wilbert and Harry. It seems we have more of a challenge being here than what I thought it was. I just hope things improve." "Mark!" It was Corpse. He came racing down the embankment in a fluster and panic. "Mark! Guys! It's gone!" Carr stuck his head out of the carriage window. "What has Rory?" Carr sprinted through the tall grass with the others following behind, till he stopped where the tech used to stand. Mud, weeds and ivy scattered the place, with small traces of rusting computer circuitry and wires lying in tangled heaps. "What could have happened?" asked Whitehouse. "This is really bad," said Cars, "and I've got a very bad feeling that whoever took it has doomed our chances of getting home entirely." "Look!" cried Casey, and pointed to a series of tire marks stretching down through the trees to where a dirt road sat. "As I feared," muttered Cars, perspiring. "We've got to get the tech back somehow. It's our only chance of getting back home." "And what if we can't?" asked Corpse. "We've got to," Cars said firmly. "There's no such word as can't when I'm around. First things first is to get back to the station and inform Wilbert and Harry of the situation. Then we plan a way of finding where the tech has been taken to. I will not rest until we have it back in our possession. You see if I don't." Those were chapters 7 and 8 of The Adventure Like No Other. They were written and read by Michael White. Please stay tuned for the next installment, where we find out what happens next.